we can bring more awareness of transnational repression on this soil in US media, in the print media, in the electronic media.
Less adversarial than Iran, but much more aggressively engaged in transnational repression than Iran, just because they have much more capacity and resources to pull it off. So yes, that's because there is that strategic alliance. It would have to become a political problem for the U.S. and for the advocates of that alliance for this to be happening. So for them to go to the Pakistanis and say, look, you have to stop this because it's making our relationship difficult.
Forcing people who are here, particularly on our own soil, to have their free speech rights undermined at the behest of foreign interests is something that resonates, I think, with Americans all Americans on the right, liberally oriented Americans, because there's such a important fabric of free speech and First Amendment protection here, that unfortunately these new platforms, the talented authoritarianism of other powers are finding creative ways to undermine this that present new challenges.
Well, basically an ISI goon and a man who was in Australia, and they had his brother with them, and they're telling the man in Australia, you need to stop tweeting, and you need to delete your tweets, and he's saying no, and then they start beating his brother.
FBI has a bigger picture. FBI is sensitized to take transnational repression very seriously. They're documenting it, and they're collecting information from all over the United States. They have a bigger picture. The police doesn't have the bigger picture. So unless the media picks it up, unless it is debated in the mainstream media, the police organizations are not going to be sensitized. They do not understand that transnational repression is an integrated thing that is coming from a foreign government. They treat all crime as local.
To associate this with what, for instance, Elon has been railing against European Union officials for what he sees as forced moderation decisions that he doesn't want to make, having to do with misinformation and hate speech, and both he and J.D. Vance have made this a big issue about how dare European bureaucrats order American tech companies that prize free speech based on our rules to adapt to some Brussels bureaucrats' whims. How dare they? That's a violation of our American sovereignty. You could associate this with that.
Saudi Arabia, you never hear Mohammed bin Salman called a dictator, even though he very much is. In Venezuela and in Pakistan, you had contested rigged elections. One of them led to sending the entire military down.
Well, I'll say a few words. I hope I remember them correctly because I don't have a written text. So Ryan is a prominent investigative journalist. He's the co-founder of Dropsite News, which has extensively covered the authoritarianism in Pakistan. But before this, he has also been the bureau chief of Intercept in Washington, D.C. And before that, bureau chief of Huffington Post. And in Huffington Post, he led the team that won Pulitzer Prize for investigative journalism. He's also the host of his own Deconstructed, you stopped.
Mostly
you stopped. But Breaking Points, you're the co-host of the Breaking Point. Ryan has written extensively on what's happening on Pakistan. So very warm welcome to you, Ryan. Thank you. Thank you so much. Robby Soave, many of you may not be familiar, is a very prominent multimedia journalist and author. And Robby Soave is the senior editor with Reason magazine. He's also the co-host of Rising program on Hill TV. Hill TV is an extension of the Hill newspaper. Now, many of you may not know that Hill newspaper is one of the most insider publication in the United States that actually tracks the developments, what's happening in DC, what's happening with the Congress. So Suave is also the author of two popular books. One, and somehow or the other, both books have the name Panic in them. So one is the Panic, Youth in the Age of Trump. The second is Tech Panic, Why We Should Not Be Afraid of Facebook and the Future. Suave has written extensively on politics, on media, on society, on cultural issues, also on civil libertarian issues. And he's also published in New York Times by so many other publications. So very warm welcome to you, to Robby Soave as well. So as I mentioned, so a very big one. I already started by talking about the transnational repression, and I thought that we can brainstorm as to how we can bring more awareness of transnational repression on this soil in US media, in the print media, in the electronic media. So I will start with your thoughts.
And one thing I would add to what you had said is that it was actually, Robby and I used to co-host Rising. Now I'm co-hosting Breaking Points. It's basically the same show, just a different name, different platform. Robby and I did that for a year or more. So, and it was my work there that actually led me to start covering Pakistan, because we're doing, 8 to 12 segments a day, every day of the week. And so that gives you more space to cover things around the world than if you're just doing one article a day or for a print publication. And so I don't remember exactly which protests were going on, but we started covering the protests that were happening in Pakistan. That led us to covering the conflict between the military and Imran Khan, and eventually led to an interview with Imran Khan. So it was that program that really kind of brought me in to that. And it's an interesting question. We and I were talking about this beforehand. How do we get the media to pay attention to this growing phenomenon of transnational repression that is not unique to Pakistan by any stretch, and isn't unique to the United States or Britain? The long arm of these authoritarian regimes knows some boundaries, but those boundaries are really evaporating. And Robby's a good one to have here to talk about that, because he's the kind of newsman that you have to get to, that you have to persuade that this is actually a story that is meaningful and that will have an audience and that is important to cover. I feel like we had one breakout moment early on at Dropsite, and we also aired the segment at Breaking Points, where we were able to get audio of the actual phone call between, I don't know if you ever saw this one, between basically an ISI goon and a man who was in Australia, and they had his brother with them, and they're telling the man in Australia, you need to stop tweeting, and you need to delete your tweets, and he's saying no, and then they start beating his brother in the background. And then a very Pakistani thing develops over the next half hour, where he's negotiating with this ISI guy and bargains him down by the end to just a 5-day pause on Twitter, and no commitment that he will stop criticizing the regime or criticizing the military, and then they end up letting his brother go after brutalizing him for a long stretch of time. So my understanding is that there are a lot more of those audios circulating in the community, and that people are reluctant to share for obvious reasons, because the people back at home are at direct and immediate risk. If there is a way to anonymize those or to share those without putting someone unnecessarily at risk of getting killed, that is a way to break through, and mainstream news outlets too would be interested. And because there's so much technology in everybody's hand, it would stand to reason that there are more of those audios circulating. And then the two cases in the UK recently, I think really probably are an opening. Now, they happened over Christmas Eve and then New Year's Eve, where I don't know, Robby, if you saw this, a man was a Pakistani dissident, was beaten up at his home.
Minister Shahzad.
Yeah.
Shahzad.
And then, they tried to burn his house down, New Year's Eve or something?
They also attacked his house.
And this was someone who we had reported that he and Adil Raja were the subject of these negotiations between the Pakistani government and the UK, where Pakistan was saying, look, you want to get these grooming gang Pakistanis out of your country, we'll take them, but you also have to give us these two dissidents, and that's the deal. And so far, the UK has said no, because that's complete, humiliation, and runs contrary to what they claim they stand for. And so, in response to that, they're now like physically attacking them on British soil, which is a direct slap in the face. So I think you have to like frame it as an insult to the dignity of the country itself, because people in the U.S. and people in Britain, they don't care about anything outside of the U.S. or Britain. That's just, most people don't, and really you can't really expect them to. They're trying to make ends meet. But if it can be framed as this is an insult to you, like they're coming into your house and doing this, then I think it can
It's an attack
resonate.
on sovereignty.
Right.
It's an attack on sovereignty.
Yeah. And so, like, as a libertarian, like, it has to be offensive to like the sensibilities of a libertarian to have an authoritarian government like creeping into your own country to do the kind of thing that we would never allow our own government to do to somebody. So what do you think is the way, like, where's the hook for this kind of thing?
Sure. Yeah, the forcing people who are here, particularly on our own soil, to have their free speech rights undermined at the behest of foreign interests is something that resonates, I think, with Americans all Americans on the right, liberally oriented Americans, because there's such a important fabric of free speech and First Amendment protection here, that unfortunately these new platforms, the talented authoritarianism of other powers are finding creative ways to undermine this that present new challenges. Ryan and I were doing a debate on tech and big tech and how this impacts society a few weeks ago, and I think we agree, we disagree on some things, but we agree that it's interesting questions are posed by these large platforms like Twitter and YouTube that individuals such as yourself and dissidents and civil liberties and human rights people have used these platforms to promote humanitarian narratives, dissident perspectives in a way that is unprecedented and that is good. At the same time, the authoritarian states can also use these platforms. They can for unprecedented levels of surveillance. The idea of them, knowing the identities of the people protesting outside the embassy and then rounding up their family members, that it only exists in a world where that kind of video footage can go viral and be tracked. But also that video footage going viral can help dissident perspectives. So it's hard to, there is a blessing and a curse about it. From a mainstream media perspective, so it is certainly clear, as Ryan said, that so much international perspective is lost and undercovered for a variety of reasons. Political bias, sheer indifference, I think sometimes a wrongful perspective among mainstream media figures that these things will not be of interest to their audiences when they actually are. And this is a good thing about the new media technology, is that we have better metrics for understanding what viewers and readers want to hear about. I think there used to be, too much, they're trying to decide, do we write a news article about this? How much time in our 1 hour broadcast, which has extreme time constraints, if I'm a television show, where we have to break for commercial every 5 minutes, and we don't have that much time, how much time will we spend on Pakistan versus whatever else? Well, now on YouTube, we can just, Ryan's got his show, I've got my show, we can just keep talking. We don't have to rap for any reason. We can talk and talk. The algorithm actually for YouTube rewards just continuing to talk and talk and talk. YouTube wants you to never shut up. They want you to go for 3 hours, Joe Rogan style, never stop talking, and play video and react to it. That is the kind of thing you can do in alt media via social media that mainstream media is constrained from doing and did not know would actually be profitable for them. So that's the good. But to answer the thought you put out about this category of kind of repression we're seeing, I think that is a little bit on the social media platforms themselves to come up with better strategies for countering harassment, doxing, that kind of thing. which they have to some extent. They're maybe not enforced the way they should be, but the people's personal information, phone numbers, addresses should not be, accounts that post those should be taken down, in my view, by the social media site. Not by order of a government, but it is the social media platform's policies, usually. And even as we debate, because it's so political, Elon Musk is very right-wing, other people are not so much, I think there's pretty much broad agreement between all the people who run social media sites that personal information of that nature ought to be taken down. But maybe there's a conversation to be had about how well that's being enforced.
Right, right. So let me see. Am I being heard from this, or this is not working? This is working. So Robby, in the last 3 years, we have seen that Federal Bureau of Investigation (FBI) is very sensitized towards transnational repression. And they reach out to the people, you can reach out to them, they document the instances so that they can raise the issue, escalate it upwards. But the local police, the city governments, they're not aware, they're not cognizant of it at all, because there's no awareness of it. So I wonder how we can raise an awareness, because if something happens anywhere, the local police is bound to take it as a routine matter. They think it's something that's happening in routine. They're not able to see, unlike FBI, that sees it in a broader framework of things happening all over the world. They're even tracking things that are happening in the UK. They're very interested to see, they're documenting what happened to Barrister Shahzal or to Adil Raja, what is being published worldwide. But the local police is a city police, as you know. So how do we raise the awareness by the print media, by the digital media, by your publication, by your magazine, as to something is really happening? I mean, and that is going to undermine the US Constitution. Because all these people who are speaking from here, we are speaking within the laws and constitutional framework of the United States.
By the time we're at the point where we're saying to ourselves, the police or the local police need to understand this is part of some international coordinated effort, it's almost too late. Because local police performance varies wildly from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. I've had my electronic scooter stolen twice this year. I'm still, waiting.
Haven't found it yet.
Waiting for them to close that investigation. I don't think it's going to happen. I'm joking. It's a very trivial matter, obviously, compared to what we're discussing. But I know people who've had their cars stolen in Washington, D.C., and they have a tracker in the car, and they know exactly where the car is, and the police are not. Even the investigation is simple. We know where it is. They're not going to do anything. So to go back
this
to
part we should expunge from the recording, because this actually encourages.
Right, yeah. So to go back to my earlier comments, getting better policing is a very fraught subject. Spreading awareness. Because think about it. This is a social media phenomenon, as you described. Obviously, the knowledge of where individual dissidents live and who they're connected to can be obtained without social media, but social media just makes it 10 or 100 times more likely that this person can be identified and harassed and harmed this way. So I think it is about raising awareness of needs for different moderation strategies, more so than police being more aware of exactly what they're facing, is what I would say.
So what do you think, Ryan?
Maybe it's as simple as like when you speak to the police, you need to be able to give them something that looks authoritative, that looks credible, and that documents what the phenomenon is in a very simple way, so that they can understand it as the simple thing that it is. So is there one website that is collecting news articles and describing what this phenomenon is? Like that would seem like a pretty simple project. It's just like,
it's a very good idea.
Transnational Repression.
It's a very good idea. So we need to basically create a dedicated website that documents all instances of transnational repression that are happening within the United States or maybe UK.
And then with links to the New York Times, to Dropsite, to the Washington Post, to the London Times, so that the police, when they look at it, okay, I can check the original primary sources on this, so I understand that this is a real thing.
But Ryan, if a publication like New York Times, Washington Post publishes one good story on the transnational repression as to what is happening, it would suddenly come in front of the Congress and everyone. It will suddenly become a big issue. One story from New York Times or Washington Post will do the job.
I don't know if it would totally do the job, but it would help.
It will help.
Yeah.
Yeah, it will help.
It shouldn't be that hard, since it's happening.
Okay. Yes, definitely. So let me also say a few things. First of all, I think that Ben Lendon of the Amnesty International is also here. So Ben, if you want to contribute something, you want to say something about the topic, you're most welcome. Matt Fisher from Congressman Suhas's team is also here. So if he wants to, I don't see him, but where are you, Matt? Okay, he just stepped out. So Matt can also contribute to the discussion. And I would also open it up to the floor for people to raise their questions. I see the correspondent of Dawn here as well. I see Ahmed Noorani Sahab here as well. I see Dr. Nadeem Hussain Nadeem here. So introduce yourself and raise the question. And I think there is a rotating mic. Is there a rotating mic, or people will have to shout at the best of their volume?
This one.
This is the rotating mic? Is this the rotating mic? And also we have this incredible gentleman, Andy Shalal, who created the Busboys and Poets all over the United States.
Thank you.
We're very lucky that he himself is actually helping us here.
You want to try this mic again, see if the volume
Yeah,
is
I think this can work. Yeah, so this can rotate.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I can. So so we can actually take it forward with the help of the questions. Najma, you want to ask the question? Well, okay. You're the first. Yeah, then Tariq Sahab after. Yeah.
Robby, since you have such a favorable opinion of big tech, Facebook and Microsoft, we should be worried about it. What role do you think social media could play on the positive side of not curtailing these dissent voices reaching out to those particular countries? Because what we're seeing happening is, for example, whether it's Iran, whether it's Pakistan, whether it's China, those voices are curtailed within the country. And so far, big tech has gone along with it for reasons. So what role do you think they could play?
Yeah, certainly, and that is frustrating. I think it is, if we're being as fair as we possibly can to the people who run these companies, let's say they're not thinking about, of course, I'm making a thought experiment. They just want to promote human rights and democracy and freedom of expression, and then the authoritarian government of, let's say it's China, let's strip this of this context. China says, well, yes, you can have Google. This is a real example, right? Yes, you can have Google in the country, but you have to censor all, Tiananmen Square and all that kind of stuff. Let's say you're the head of Google. Should you do that? Even if you do want to just advance freedom in the country, should you say, hell no, no compromises with tyranny, no YouTube in China then? Or do you say, well, it's still probably better for dissident perspectives if YouTube is there and not there, and maybe they'll get, the censorship of government topics will be imperfect. Maybe they'll Google Tiananmen Square sometimes and it comes up. I think this is a kind of hard question from just what would be the best thing for freedom and democracy in China. Then you add in, well, of course they want to make money, and of course they have all that. And I'm very wary of these large companies having incentive to just always play ball with or always humor the authoritarian government, although Elon and X have had some creative stands against some governments, not Brazil, yes, Pakistan, no. At the end of the day, there has to be, the customers have to demand of these leaders that these products remain free and open, at least to people who are in America or in a country where there's protections against the government asking for that kind of censorship. Certainly, there can be no level of censorship or going along with harassment campaigns there. I think that's a very clear answer. I think what the head of the company is supposed to do in a place where the government wants some level of censorship, whether they should go along with it because it's better than nothing at all, I think this is a little bit more difficult than some people have maybe.
So Robby, the Twitter, the X has struck a very interesting deal with the government of Pakistan.
Yes.
They banned them and blocked them in February 2024 when people were complaining of the rigged election. Then in this year, in March or April, the Twitter was deblocked in Pakistan on a deal that they would start deboosting the major hard hitters. So people like me who have millions of followers, our reach has been totally reduced. So my reach and so many other dozens of people in US, our reach has been cut. So we had more reach when Twitter was blocked in Pakistan because people were actually accessing us through VPN. Now since Twitter is open, so people think it's open and they have deboosted us. Similarly, they impress upon Google and YouTube by making these cases. Like now, they have awarded me 85 years of punishment for being a terrorist. So they actually take this case to Google. They influence the Google. They say this channel is sensitive content. So Google actually stops my recommendation. The YouTube has stopped my recommendation from the homepage, so people cannot see.
Is that since the verdict?
No. This has been happening for the past several months,
Okay.
because this is not the only case they registered against.
You were interviewed by Mario Nawfal, right?
Yes, I was the one.
Yes, and he this is Elon Musk's favorite media figure
Is he?
on the entire planet.
Is he?
He
Yeah.
he retweets Mario Nawfal's account more than any other account on his
So Mario
platform.
Nawfal is my way forward.
Yes, but get him to tell Elon that you're one of the good guys and the regime is not friendly to free speech and electric cars, and you'll have an entirely different policy overnight.
But do you
That's
think
my literal advice.
Okay,
Yeah.
so but do you think
It will
on
work
an
too.
Right?
Okay, on an institutional level, do you think we can engage Google, we can engage YouTube, we can engage X, through seminars, conferences, meetings? Is it possible? Because right now, these platforms are totally non-transparent and opaque.
Yes, and that is a frustration. The platforms and the people who run them are definitely sensitive to political pressure because the platforms, in the day and age where Ryan and I hosted Rising, the show I do now, we were up against considerable moderation from social media companies that made it very difficult for us to do our job relating to COVID topics and election topics, where even us just reporting on for what the Trump administration, for instance, was saying about the 2020 election was getting our channel taken down and we were not boosting or agreeing with the theories of the administration. We were literally just saying, here's what the administration is saying about, or here's what candidate Trump is saying about the election. And YouTube was coming in under, frankly, pressure from mainstream media and Democratic figures to take misinformation more seriously in a way that was really harming coverage of the existence of misinformation. My point being,
But what solution
they have
you found?
they got so much criticism from from people like Ryan and I and the political right. They've abandoned doing that entirely.
Okay.
And they admitted that was wrong and will never do that again. So they are sensitive to feedback,
They're sensitive to feedback.
to political constraints.
What are your ideas?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to, I think, yes, political pressure works, and then the more political pressure you can build, then if you have direct contacts, I assume you have a YouTube, a person who's the representative, since your channel's so large,
Right.
that you can at least communicate with. The more people you can find inside that are even higher than that, and if there's political pressure that creates the space
Right.
for them to operate internally, that's it's possible, but it's a constant fight.
It's a constant
and you're
fight.
outmatched.
It's a process. So Dr. Hussain, Nadeem, Ahmed Noorani, Ben Linden, I'm looking for the questions. Who wants to be the first? Tariq sir, you wanted to have the question.
Yeah, actually, I had a question regarding transnational repression. You mentioned that the local police sometimes doesn't take as much interest as the FBI. Is it because when the FBI comes in and then they tell the local police that, hey, we're taking over this, this is not in your preview. Is that the reason they don't take too much interest, the local police? And secondly, I think Ryan mentioned that when the Washington Post or the New York Times and one of these big papers, when they write about it, Congress they take more interest in this. So my question to those who visit Congress on a regular basis, what is their view? Does Congress actually take any interest at all when they go and talk about transnational repression, or are they, it just goes by the wayside?
Okay, before you, I'll explain to you what the police problem is. Police in the United States is local. So every few miles, there's a different police organization, there's a different city, there's a different police organization, and they treat crime as local. If the crime becomes other than the city, it is bigger than the city, then of course things start falling either on the state police or on the FBI. So FBI has a bigger picture. FBI is sensitized, they take transnational repression very seriously, they're documenting it, and they're collecting information from all over United States. They have a bigger picture. The police doesn't have the bigger picture. So unless the media picks it up, unless it is debated in the mainstream media, the police organizations are not going to be sensitized. They do not understand that transnational repression is an integrated thing that is coming from a foreign government. They treat all crime as local. You know, there might actually be any kind of accident they have to treat as local. This was the problem in UK when in Cambridgeshire, Barrister Shahzad Akbar was beaten and his house was attacked. Unless the second attack happened, the Cambridge police treated it as a local crime. Then they realized something is happening in Cambridge and London. It's bigger than the Cambridge police. And then they invited the Scotland Yard into it. In this country, fortunately, the FBI is very organized. So it starts investigating. But the FBI also says this thing that the local police needs to be sensitized more. It should be more in the media. More should be written. Congress should be approached about it. They basically say it. So I think I have answered to that point. Yes, yours.
Yeah, I think the best you can hope for out of the local police is if the FBI is not yet involved in a case or interested in a case, that the local police can can vouch for you. You can go to the FBI and say, look, this looks like it's above our pay grade. This is something that you guys should pay attention to, because the FBI gets a lot of people reaching out to them all the time, and they only take up 1% of the complaints that are filed their way. So if you can persuade the local police and make them your advocates with the FBI, then that's better. But that's about all you're going to get from the local police, because imagine if you're a local police officer or even a local police chief, and you're told that like the actual criminal in this case might be a dictator in Pakistan. You're like,
yeah, exactly.
What do you want me to do about that? Like,
exactly. So yeah, I'll just add one more sentence. You see, the local police response is very quick. We have seen this thing in 3 minutes. 4 minutes is too much. 3 minutes is the response time when you call 911. They come from all directions. They're very quick. They respond very quickly. However, as Ryan has said, you start telling them this is ISI or some general doing it, they look towards your face because they do not understand these things, So this is what the problem is.
And also, if they did understand it, like, they feel accurately totally powerless.
Yeah.
But they have no jurisdiction over Asim Munir.
Exactly. So,
was there a second part of the question there about Congress? I think Congress is, Congress so far is only interested in this as a constituent services issue. Like if somebody lives in a particular congressional district and is being harassed, or their family is being kidnapped and they're being threatened, then that's a constituent issue. They can reach out to the State Department. They can be another advocate to get the FBI involved. The fact that Chris Van Hollen is a Maryland senator, but also one of the most respected senators when it comes to the State Department, like State Department staff and career. Obviously, the leadership doesn't respect him because he's a Democrat, but the staff. He was actually, he was born in Pakistan.
Yeah, he was born in Pakistan.
Both his parents were CIA and/or State Department, and so the fact that he is in Maryland, like, should help with people who live in Maryland.
Yes. He's very busy though.
Yeah. Spanberger,
Virginia.
Not necessarily helpful, I think, because of her own CIA connections. She's still deeply connected to the CIA, whereas Van Hollen is much more willing to be critical of them, and the CIA seems to be quite comfortable with the current Pakistan regime.
That's true.
But Tim Kaine, I think, doesn't have that same. And Mark Warner is very close. He's very close to the CIA, so he's probably useless. So probably Tim Kaine and.
So when you say that someone is close to CIA is useless, you mean CIA is like allowing it or letting it happen?
I don't think. Yeah, I don't see them making it something that they're going to crack down on. They'd have to be pressured politically. It would have to be embarrassing for them
And the pressure can come from media and from the Congress. That's why I think once the issue becomes a media issue in this country, then of course everyone is going to take it more seriously.
Well, the issue is that it's not a, how do I say this? In some ways, if it could become a more partisan issue, it would get more media attention. I know there's kind of a default sort of support for the current regime, but without a deeply thought through or important interest in what's going on. It could certainly be much worse. The current administration could certainly be much more robustly and vigorously in support of suppression of dissidents in Pakistan. So yay that it's not come to that. It could obviously be better. The two sort of Trump-connected officials, I believe, who've said something about Imran Khan positively was Rick Grinnell and Matt Gaetz. And unfortunately, both of those individuals I would describe as relatively, well, Matt Gaetz is completely sidelined. He's a media personality himself now for a conservative news. Well, he's not in Congress. And Rick Grinnell is not there was some hope that he would be an important person in this administration, and he is not. I know something about the foreign policy debates on the right in Republican circles. There are a lot of them. The Trump administration is kind of between a couple different ideologies on the right. Obviously, the decline of neoconservatism as the important animating force on the right's foreign policy is true, but there's still many neoconservative figures in important positions, including Marco Rubio himself, who is the most important person on foreign policy. Also, some of the vocal anti-interventionist voices like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie are now completely at odds with Trump for somewhat unrelated reasons, but that's not going to help. But Trump himself doesn't have a deeply held philosophy about foreign policy and could be persuaded based on the last person he talked to or some more expedient political interest. So there's not some principled or deeply ideologically held opposition to being better on democracy in Pakistan, which is a weak endorsement, but there you go.
But Ryan, there is another problem is this, that if Pakistan is an allied country, strategic alliance and all that, if transnational repression is coming from a hostile country like Iran, then the system will take it more seriously. When things are being done from Pakistan, they're easily ignored. That's a problem too.
Right, and it's easier for the New York Times to write about China, for instance, too. Because China, less adversarial than Iran, but much more aggressively engaged in transnational repression than Iran, just because they have more capacity and resources to pull it off. So yes, that's because there is that strategic alliance. It would have to become a political problem for the U.S. and for the advocates of that alliance for this to be happening. So for them to go to the Pakistanis and say, look, you have to stop this because it's making our relationship difficult. So it has to get to that place before in Washington they take it seriously.
So I'm told that the correspondent of Al Jazeera, Moeed, he's also here if he wants to raise a question. So you're most welcome. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, same name like yourself. I work for AJ Plus.
Al Jazeera Plus.
The younger folks.
Yes, the young ones doing the video.
I just had a question actually, because as you guys were talking earlier about particularly social platforms, which are really like through which most of the young people find out about most things, and that's where if you want to create a trust for against censorship, that's where you have to create it. Because the incentive structure for social platforms increasingly is going to lead them to censor dissidents and voices like that consistently. And we've seen it happen over the last 10 years, and it's going to happen more so. So you need to create trust, and that's what happens through shining a light on stuff that's happening. One of the best examples of that I saw in relation to Pakistan, not specifically this, was, I don't know if you guys know, there was a campaign against when India started using pellet guns against protesters in Kashmir. This was in 2016. And there was this massive campaign where they had celebrities with, with pellets damaging their eyes and stuff like this as well. It was massive. It went global at that time. It was something of that nature relating to Pakistan capture like such a big amount of attention in the global media space. Have you seen examples of this? Because that's the only way that I see like really successful social media like campaigns that can go viral, which create a cost for social platforms. Because at that time, Mark Zuckerberg was was held accountable for a lot of the censorship that happened of the violence that India was doing in Kashmir at that time. Have you seen examples of this in recent times? Because that's what we have to learn from. I think that's the key thing.
I haven't, I don't think. Have you seen any?
Have you seen what?
Like examples of viral campaigns that have highlighted even some type of human rights abuse, even if it's not transnational repression. Can anybody think of any other example?
This gentleman here just mentioned Myanmar a few years ago. So it's very rare. It's very difficult to do because the power is so concentrated within the power structure of the state and the social platforms. You have to cozy up to them to be able to have, revenue in those countries. So it's totally the incentive structure is inverted in this regard.
Yeah, I think it would require more audio and video evidence of it, and because it's that visceral kind of tangible element that allows people to circulate, have something to circulate beyond just an article or people's claims. So I think that would help if you give more examples.
That made me think of something. A lot of people don't know this, but Facebook is unique among major social media platforms in I think in response to the Myanmar situation where a lot of very bad moderation on the part of the platform was responsible for, implicitly maybe responsible for some real atrocities. They did create a kind of Supreme Court of Facebook that is a very interesting organization that includes and consults with free speech and human rights experts all over the globe. I've attended a few of their kind of briefings that they've given in Washington, D.C., where essentially they review, much like our own Supreme Court, they cannot do case by case for every single moderation decision that needs to take place, but they have considered often in an international context, maybe in Africa or something, where a moderation decision was made to take down some video of an atrocity being committed by someone where the government made such a request and the Facebook complied, and now the court will decide whether that was right. Again, it's internal to Facebook. More often than not, reverses the decision that the platform made or some moderator made to police that kind of content. I think it's an interesting creative experiment in how these things will be dealt with.
So in my experience, then having followed them for a while, it's lip service. It's not really structurally fixing anything because it's totally internal to them, and in so many examples of them looking to the other way. So it's where a company will do something, just a minor thing to show like, hey, look, we're doing this, and we're doing it in the best way possible. I think power absolutely is coming from very independent external, and I think the influencer model that's kind of obviously reigns supreme, including YouTube or TikTok and so on. That is probably the only way where there's coordination amongst them around issues like this. Because that's the only way. For example, if suddenly a bunch of the top influencers say, hey, we're going to stop publishing for 2 weeks. Obviously, essentially that's right. I can only see in that kind of success or something. Obviously, it's a difficult thing to do because rely on it.
The other unique thing that Facebook used to do, which was they had during the era I was referring to previously of COVID and election-related disinformation, they had independent fact-checking organizations operating on the platform people who were partnered with Facebook but not internal to Facebook, having very sweeping powers to suppress content on the platform. I would argue it was done in a very ideological way and was often prone to extreme error, and my own articles were on occasion targeted by it.
I mean, we need to basically talk to YouTube and Google that how can they be obeying orders from a Pakistani court? After all, you're an American company. There have to be some own process. So the YouTube responded by immediately getting in touch with the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, and they said, we're not blocking any channels. You know, we'll do the process. We haven't done it. If you block, we can only do it in Pakistan. And they haven't even blocked in Pakistan. So such was the effect of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission. A few comments. So I think this helps. You know, if issue is raised, it really helps.
Well, and one more. Sorry to monopolize, but to associate this with what, for instance, Elon has been railing against European Union officials for what he sees as forced moderation decisions that he doesn't want to make, having to do with misinformation and hate speech, and both he and J.D. Vance have made this a big issue about how dare European bureaucrats, order American tech companies that prize free speech based on our rules to adapt to some Brussels bureaucrats' whims. How dare they? That's a violation of our American sovereignty. You could associate this with that as a similar effort by some liberal bureaucrat in Pakistan to suppress Elon Musk's God-given free speech right. I swear this is the right way to approach this. Get Mario to tell him.
Yeah. So Mario becomes a hope. So more questions, there's so many. Ben Linden, Ben, Anwar Iqbal sir, yes.
I'm Anwar Iqbal and work for Pakistan's Dawn newspaper. And you guys are particularly talking about how to influence Pakistan to stop doing what it is doing.
Say it again.
You guys are talking about how to stop Pakistan from doing what it is doing.
Right.
But does it work? I mean, I and you know several examples where it did not work, like during the war against the Soviets. Okay, Pakistan got hold of the French ambassador while he was making a video of Pakistan's nuclear installation. They beat him up, they broke his front teeth, and nothing happened. And then the BBC's bureau chief, Chris Sherwell, was beaten up and drawn across the street and thrown on the main road, and nothing happened. Pakistan only listens when it feels the need to listen. Otherwise, for 20 years, they defied the United States on the Taliban. They kept their relationship with the Taliban, and not so secretly. I mean, everybody knew what was happening, and the Pakistanis did not listen to Washington. So why do you suppose that you discussing here in Busboys and Poets will actually have an impact on Pakistan?
So in what circumstances the Pakistan listens?
It does not. It only listens. It wants to. I mean, this is like 40 years of experience. I have, you know that I've covered the war in Afghanistan. I've covered doing it for like 40 years. Interviewed everybody from Bin Laden to Obama to Bush, and I've only seen it working. I mean, Ziaul sitting in this town, I was there with him covering that thing, and he said when McLaughlin asked him, finally, do you have the bomb or not? And he laughed and he said, there's $1 million question. And they could not. First, they knew he was making a bomb, and they couldn't stop him. So why would they stop just listening to what this discussion was?
But Anwar Sahab, I don't think we are expecting them to stop after listening to the discussion.
We are just having a discussion.
Yeah. So we want to raise awareness about transnational repression within the United States, so that there can be a greater understanding of what's really happening. Now, when you say that they do not respond, it is not a black and white situation. Pakistan is more sensitive to Western opinion than many other countries. When it wants to. The country is heavily dependent. It depends upon the nature of relationship. I mean, Pakistan, after all, is heavily dependent upon its relationship with the Western institutions like IMF, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the UK aid. It also has the GSP+. Such is the interdependence of the West with Pakistan, which is a separate subject, that they have never flexed the muscle. I mean, when you look at Iran, for instance. No, but Anwar Sahab, Western institutions have such interdependence and relationship, and Hussain Nadeem is here, he can also contribute to it. Such is the nature of interdependence between Western institutions in Pakistan that they are prepared to ignore many things which Pakistan does. For instance, such as if you look at the Pakistan's human rights record, it is probably as worse as it could be anywhere in the world. But GSP Plus continues. If Iran was doing the same things, if another country is doing the same things, look at the kind of fire that is emitting on Iran from Western media. But Pakistan has done killings and massacres, and thousands of people have been arrested and made to disappear. Look what's happening in Balochistan, what's happening as erstwhile Fatah. But none of the mainstream Western media in UK, Europe, and United States has ever picked up the plight of the people, what's happening. So there is a nature of a relationship that doesn't allow them. Historically, that's true, but now more and more people are talking of Balochistan. But Ryan, what is your understanding why the Western values are applied on one country and not on the other country? So the Western media never brings what's happening in Pakistan in a sharp focus. Well, Korea can be in sharp focus, China can be in sharp focus, Iran can be in sharp focus, some other countries, but for instance, look, there's no talk of what's happening in Saudi Arabia, for instance.
Right, Saudi Arabia, you never hear Mohammed bin Salman called a dictator, even though he very much is. In Venezuela and in Pakistan, you had contested rigged elections. One of them led to sending the entire military down to swoop in and get the guy. The other, the winner is still in prison. And the people that did the rigging are in control. So Venezuela is an adversary of the United States. Pakistan's military is a friend of the United States. So I think it's kind of as simple as that. But the point is well taken that they're very adept at playing people against each other and listening when they want to listen. On the other hand, there's a set of priorities, like how important is it to them to continue engaging in this high level of transnational repression? Like, how important is it? And that is indicative of how much the U.S. can kind of accomplish by putting a little pressure, and how much pressure is the U.S. willing to put on. That's kind of the calculus. The current military regime feels like extremely paranoid, which breeds extreme amounts of repression. And so that would lead me to conclude that this kind of repression is a very, very high priority, which means you would need a lot of pressure to get them to back off of it.
So Robby, when Western values are not applied equally, so when the Western Europe, UK, and United States talk of a liberal world order or democracy, but then you see there's a clear contradiction in how it is applied on Iran and how it is applied in Pakistan, how election scrutiny is applied to Venezuela and how it is applied on Pakistan. Perhaps the Pakistani elections were more rigged than the Venezuelan election. But on Venezuelan election, the IMF stopped, definitely more rigged than Venezuelan election. But IMF still goes ahead. The IMF refused giving the bailout package to Venezuela. The Europe and Western Europe, only 30 countries in the world recognize the Venezuelan elections. The Venezuelan elections were not recognized, but Pakistani elections, which were far more rigged and totally flawed, were recognized by the Western world. So what does it tell about the Western values of liberalism?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a couple different, institutions. If you're talking about it from, why does the federal government not recognize that very obvious hypocrisy that you just pointed out? Like, well, maybe they do, but they don't care. They're not trying to be Donald Trump is not trying to be ideologically consistent, certainly, but neither is the State Department. I mean, their view is this would be, for Venezuela, that they could be wrong about this, but that this would be easy to do and would not cause problems for the U.S. and some kind of sustained involvement. I mean, if you want to get more precise about it, the ideology of the Trump administration's foreign policy is America first, is trying to make that be about we have more of a right or more of an obligation, or it will be more successful if there's more interference in the Americas and less interference in the Middle East. You can totally disagree with that, but that's just the view of where the right is now. If you're talking about, why do media institutions and thinkers and Western personas who ascribe or aspire to a bit more ideological consistency, why don't they think about it in those terms? I've been forced to concede that a lot of people are not motivated by ideological or intellectual consistency as much as I thought beforehand, that as tribalism and partisanship have become, rather than ideological thinking, have become the dominant trends in American politics and political media. It's very Democratic and Republican based, and if Trump decides this is the view of the Republican Party now, there's some internal disagreement, but mostly that's the party's view. Like, the Republicans were not for tariffs, but Trump's for tariffs, so now Republicans are for tariffs. Democrats are more against tariffs than they were before because they're just a reaction to Trump. It's not organized as much as it used to be among a set of coherent, consistent principles about what you want the world to be, and just about literally a contest between two party organizations. That's the technical and frustrating answer.
That is the frustrating answer. So, who has the mic? Yes.
Hello. That's it, right? Hello? Yes. Yeah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with old friends and new ones. The unfortunate thing is that all three of the ones on stage pretty much make me a lazy academic, because my students are listening to you guys, reading you guys all the time. And so I sent two of them outside before I made this comment. But it's true. The work you guys do, it's just incredible, and please continue doing it. So I'm Junaid, for those who don't know. I teach religion, law, and politics. I was based in Pakistan for about 15 years, teaching in Lahore, LUMS, UMT, NDU, National Defense University. And now I'm pretty much an academic in exile. And I spend my time between the US and South Africa. And anyone that knows my work, I really take on these guys. And I expect in Virginia, it's really interesting, because I have been a victim of TNR for quite a while now, transnational repression. But the interesting thing is that I also live in the most militarized area in this country, which is Hampton Roads. I didn't even think about this before, but it is the naval headquarters, Army. And so I have a lot of students which are in the military. And so it's interesting. We talk about interagency wars within Pakistan. So I do benefit from that. Although TNR is here, many people who probably haven't spoken about it, I think the idea of having some platform where we actually post this, I think you'll get a lot more people that will do that. Second thing was the issue of the media. The issue of the media. One of the problems, as I think Katie even asked you that, Dr. Pirzada. Katie's an old friend, and much of the alternative and independent media are old friends. That after the regime change in 2002, I was invited to speak on them.
2022.
Sorry, 2022. Sorry, although it seems like there's a recycling coup but there was literally no one else, and I've always identified as being a progressive on the left, but from the Pakistani liberals and progressives, you know this very well, that no, they just would not be willing to speak against that for some reason, their contempt of Khan. And so now they can no longer carry that narrative. Now you do have this incredibly authoritarian regime, which is why you have now Dr. Pirzada and others being invited. So Dr. Pirzada, the New York Times, the Washington Post, they will come. We have now entered, finally, after quite 3 years, in these alternative spaces. We really have to capitalize on that, particularly with the points that are being made. These spaces are actually being turned to probably far more than much of the legacy media. So that would be just my input into that. We really need you guys to cover this right now. It's very clear. There's an opening.
So what are your suggestions, apart from the fact that these alternate spaces can be helpful in raising the awareness? Yeah. What else can be done? Because right now, today, we have only focused on transnational repression. Many times when we get together, we also focus on what's happening inside Pakistan. Yeah. The way 70% of the people have elected one party, but the elections have been stolen. The man who's the most popular man across the country, Imran Khan, has been put in jail for 2 years and 5 months now. And, I mean, weeks and weeks pass on. For instance, in the past 2 years and 5 months, no one has seen a glimpse of him. We have never heard him, we've never seen his picture, we've never seen an image of him. And all that is also being forgotten. We are in fact discussing that transnational repression is coming to our doors. So the authoritarianism is actually coming to this soil, I mean, which was unexpected. I mean, it's coming to British soil. So what are your suggestions on that?
My suggestion is to, first of all, tell all of our friends and media that this is the most scandalous cover-up in probably the 21st century. We are talking about a country of 250 million, nuclear armed, 6th largest military, within the Muslim world, perhaps the largest English-speaking intelligentsia globally.
Right.
And this issue. So I really do think that we need to tell all of these media folks that, look, this has been a huge scandal. So forget about the New York Times, Washington Post. At this time, it is your responsibility. The facts are there for us to just convey to them how much of a scandal this is. When people like Brian and others, when you actually tell them this story, Katie had the same reaction. It's like, wow, how come I haven't been covering this or other alternative media? Because it is a huge story. So I think you have led the way now, and they are hungry. The problem with me in the early years after 2022, the optics looked horrible. I go on here to there, and they'd be like, wait a second, we're not hearing this perspective from any other progressive.
Right.
And so that's why I even slowed down, because it looked quite awkward.
Right.
But now we have that opening. So we really have to take advantage of it.
Thanks for the input. Stay connected. So Ryan, what brought you to Pakistan, and how you got interested in Pakistan? Because you're the first one who is actually a sort of a pioneer of the fact that you have brought the interest, and Katie Halper has joined in, Mario Knopfel has joined in, now we have Robby Soave has joined in. So how have you jumped onto the bandwagon?
Well, my colleague Maz, my colleague Murtaza Hussain, he was actually born there. He only spent a few months, maybe a year or two before moving to Canada and then moving to the United States. But he had always covered it. But then, when we were at Rising, we covered the world. Like we would, most 90% of what we did was the U.S., but then we would sprinkle in domestic, foreign coverage. I remember we invited Waqas Ahmed on as one of our first guests to brief us, and he's tremendous. He's a terrific journalist, and so he was able to talk about it in a way that resonated with me and with the audience, and brought people in a way that a lot of other commentators can't. That he's able to universalize it.
Right.
And then seeing the Pakistani people's resilience in the face of all this was inspiring. Especially in the February elections. Robby, I don't know if you guys covered these. February 2024, they shut the internet down. They moved everybody's polling locations all over the place. They banned the biggest party from even using its symbol, which in a country where half the voters can't read is crucial. Wouldn't let the candidates run on the party. They had to run as independents. Beat up the candidates, disappeared them, took them off the ballot, and still on election day, they came out and won, which is just truly inspiring and remarkable, because here you have several months to vote. You can vote by mail, absentee, you can show up at election day. Everybody here can read for the most part. Nobody's disappeared. There are no terrorist attacks on so far. But even if there were, the scale would be completely different.
Right.
And we're looking at 30-40% participation rates, and so to see, and I think that most of the voters knew that their votes would not count.
Right.
Knew in their gut that it was going to be rigged and stolen,
right.
And yet came out anyway to make them do it. And there's something kind of deeply inspiring.
They wanted to speak through their vote.
Yeah.
So Robby, just what Junaid, the academic, says, that Pakistan is the 5th largest nation state in the world, 250 million people, 2nd largest Muslim nation after Indonesia. the largest English-speaking diaspora, the English-speaking community of any Muslim country in the world, the largest military, the most well-equipped military, nuclear weapons, Why Pakistan is not a story for New York Times, from Washington Post, from LA? Why it's not a story?
Well, I don't know. How do we make it a story? The Washington Post actually does, in addition to all of its broader global coverage, does purport to be also a local paper that covers Washington, D.C. To the extent, you're describing this phenomenon as happening to people in the D.C. area, the Virginia area, it could be something taken up by the Washington Post, which also, by the way, is owned by Jeff Bezos of Amazon, a big tech figure himself, who did recently, about a year ago, articulate that the editorial page of the Washington, but he said this in a public letter, would take on his own politics, which happen to be very similar to my politics. Ryan doesn't like them, but they're free markets, but also free speech and civil liberties. So I don't know, get his attention on it. It could be something the Washington Post would be more likely to cover now as owned by someone who purports to be ideologically committed to the idea that people should not have their speech or their civil liberties repressed at the behest of foreign dictators. Again, that's not a partisan finding, which might be the reason it doesn't generate more media attention. I think that's the thrust of my comments, that because everything needs to be filtered in, is this pro-Trump or anti-Trump, unless you can very easily explain how it is vis-a-vis Trump, there is less interest in it from the mainstream media. That's the bottom line. Trump has consumed our politics. Everything is about him and how a story can advance a narrative that serves his interests, if it's media that is friendly to him, or explain why he is evil and everything he stands for is evil if it's mainstream media. So things that don't fit neatly into that framework get ignored. That's what I would say.
Yeah, no, I talked to a top Wall Street Journal editor about this, and they said...
You talked to whom?
A Wall Street Journal editor.
Wall Street Journal editor.
And they said, if it's not, and this was a time, if it's not Ukraine, Russia, and it's not Israel, Palestine, there's just no room for it.
But we come to you on 26th November 2024. Pakistani military fired at peaceful demonstrators who actually at the sleeping time of past 11 p.m. Thousands of people, right? We do not know how many people died. The official figure, well, the government has never admitted they fired, but the hospital figures, at least they confirmed deaths are at least 12 to 14. But it's believed that dozens and dozens more died and bodies were taken away. Your publication, Dropsite, is the only publication that covered it, and then some coverage came from BBC Urdu, and some came from Al Jazeera. No publication across the world in United Kingdom, Guardian, Telegraph, Times, Evening Standard, Financial Times, New York Times, Washington Post covered it. The story in the New York Times is funny to the extent that the correspondent that filed the story says, according to PTI, there was some firing. Despite the fact that while the time the story was fired, the correspondent was in Islamabad and he knew that the whole country knew about the firing and the deaths. Why it is this kind of insensitivity?
Well,
but that doesn't explain what Suave says. Suave says of lack of interest or perhaps not being commercially viable. This is something more. This is almost like a conspiracy of silence.
Yeah, this is compromised media. These are people who are in the country. A lot of them have family in the country, and so they are compromised in the sense that they're worried about, it's not transnational, but it's just repression within the country. Transnational in the sense that some of them are American citizens, but they're living in Pakistan. Some of them are just seem to be like lackeys of the regime. I think the New York Times reporter, what's his name?
Salman.
Yeah, like he seems to just be extremely close in an unprofessional way with the military, and has been for a long time. And so that's you're going to get better coverage, ironically, from outlets that don't have kind of bureaus in the country, because that is a vulnerability.
So if the correspondents travel from outside the region to cover something, then they can be more impartially covered.
Yes, because the vulnerability comes in two ways: either threats or bribery and that kind of compromise.
Agreed. You have a question.
Yes, so if I could just add on to Junaid's point about the alternative media covering transnational repression, TNR. Now, we'd expect the left-wing media for this remit to fall under the left-wing media anyway. My question to Robby would be, how do we get the right-wing alternative media interested in this topic? Because some clear points would be the liberty of the person or freedom of speech. And we know right now, J.D. Vance and Elon Musk are very much in favor of free speech, but it doesn't seem to be sufficient. And I think it's not just in relationship to Pakistan. TNR in general is not being picked up as an interesting concept. So how would we tackle the right wing to think about it in terms of their own principles that they believe in?
Yeah, a couple high-profile right-wing Twitter accounts retweeting. Yeah, what's that?
Mario.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's,
once again, we have to go to Mario Nofo.
And he's the big video guy on X. But there are so many other just right-wing commentators who we have on our program sometimes who live on social media, who retweet things constantly, and then Elon Musk retweets them. That's how it starts with something goes viral that fits a right-wing framing around whatever the issue of the day is. It's retweeted by a lesser level of right-wing figures, and then it makes it to bigger people, and then it's retweeted by J.D. Vance, Elon Musk, and others. So again, now they're always looking for angles on why a story has to do with, the political axis being wielded. The Democratic Party is doing something the Republicans don't like. And again, this doesn't have that partisan interest. But yes, you're right that conservatives have at least claimed in recent years a free speech mantle, got a lot of mileage out of criticizing the Biden administration for perceived and in many cases, in my view, actual violations of free speech on social media, again relating to COVID speech and other things, and how Biden not explicitly forcing social media companies to do this kind of moderation, but officials encouraging them to moderate speech in a way that is, I would argue, constitutionally suspect. So the right has, especially the online alternate media right, has organized itself around being a free speech movement. Unfortunately, ideological commitments are very weak among a lot of people, as I've said. But yes, I think it would be useful to. I think it could be the case that I mean, people like Matt Gaetz, for instance, is actually someone very plugged into what the online right is into and understood the online right very, very well. So there's no barrier to that happening. It's just somebody needs to make it happen.
Just hire him, right?
What's that?
So
you just hire Matt Gaetz?
Who, me?
You guys.
Oh, yeah.
Does he take consulting gigs? He probably does.
There are several questions. There are several questions.
$5,000-$10,000 a month for Matt Gaetz.
There are two questions here, and Ben on the other side also wants to raise a question. So you who has the mic. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for raising the issue of Pakistan in the national limelight. We are all very thankful for Ryan Gibb especially and Mr. Wallace for keeping that out, because it's a huge tragedy for all us Pakistanis for what's happening in Pakistan. Second thing I want to say is that this transnational repression is mainly because of no democracy in Pakistan. If we didn't have that problem, this would go away. Third, the most important thing is I was going to suggest is that money is basis of all evil. And in Pakistan, the way we hear, their financial situation is pretty on the edge. But a lot of their finances are coming up from all the funds that overseas Pakistanis are sending back. I think we should make a concerted effort for Pakistanis not to send the money back till things settle down. Thank you.
Well, that could be a right-wing issue.
Actually,
not sending money back out of the country.
The right wing would happily circulate that one.
Yeah.
No, but the remittances actually do not go back from North America and Europe. Remittances are actually increasing because a very large number of Pakistanis have been forced to leave Pakistan in the last 2 years, and they've all headed to Saudi Arabia, UAE, Oman, Qatar, and Bahrain.
Well, it sounds like to me that they pushed out a lot of educated people out of Pakistan for this reason. I think that they thought there is not a brain drain. They say, no, it's a brain gain.
So definitely, but the structure of that problem is this, that people have to feed their wives and their children and their parents back home. So their remittances cannot be stopped because of any political reasons or persuasion by us or anyone, because it's a structural problem. The funds are not going from North America or UK. The funds are essentially going from Middle East. These are poor people who have to feed their families. Their children are in school. Their parents are in the hospital. Anwar sir, you have a question, but Ben has a question too. Okay, go ahead. Okay, let's take the Ben. Okay.
Well, I don't have a question. I just wanted to address what you raised before, which was how the New York Times, the Washington Post decides what story to take and what not to take.
Right.
And I have to take that decision every day for the last 25 years.
Right.
You know, I write every day, according to the State Department, I write more than the entire South Asian press corps put together. And
according to State Department, you write more than?
The entire South Asian press corps put together. I write at least.
No, that's very true. You cover everything. That's very true.
And how I decide that? Sit down, we have a meeting at 6 p.m. Pakistan time, which is 8 a.m. Washington time. And we sit down the issues that the paper is going to cover today. And I have on my priority list is a big protest in Washington, D.C. outside the Black Lives Matter Plaza, because that looks like a very big issue in Washington. But when they say that, look, 10 people were killed in Gujranwala, okay, and then this happened in Karachi, and that happened in Lahore, then first the story gets pushed from the front page to the back page to the international page, and finally out to the newspaper. So you have to, the news is always local. So your first consideration, your first interest is what your readers are interested in. And that is how the stories get pushed out.
Right. So I'll respond to this, but let's actually take Ben, because he's been waiting for quite a while. Yeah, thank you. Ben, first just let the Ben, because he's waiting for quite a while. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is a really fascinating conversation. I work for Amnesty International. Take this with a grain of salt. I'm not in media. I'm really interested in this conversation about how this can break through in broader media. I think maybe one of the questions is one of the framings is whether you focus on the specific or the more general. What we're seeing from a human rights perspective is a much larger assault on vulnerable populations, on vulnerable groups across Pakistan. We're seeing, of course, transnational repression. We're also seeing mass surveillance, a program of mass surveillance, of mass censorship as well. The use of a commercialized version of China's Great Firewall being brought into Pakistan to censor what the population can see. We're also seeing, of course, attacks on the rights of Afghan refugees, the largest forced population transfer in recent years of over 1.4 million people back to a country where they face severe threats to their lives. This also comes, amid, of course, the 27th Amendment, an attack on rule of law, attack on the independence of the judiciary, the imposition of impunity, lifelong impunity for the leadership. So I think my question is, and we can go on about attacks on other groups, Ahmadis, Christians, those that are targeted by anti-blasphemy laws. So my question is, from a journalistic perspective or from a media perspective, does it help to tie the individual instances to a larger narrative about attacks on a broader segments of the population, whether those are particular marginalized groups, political opposition, judiciary, rule of law, a general breakdown in the rule of law? Is that I'm sure it's challenging. Is that a narrative that could be used to tell a broader story?
Have you understood the question?
Yes, I think it can. I feel like, and maybe this is my bias as a news person, like that the individual cases that are the ones that break out. You know, we saw that in Minnesota this week. We have known that ICE has been carrying out a deranged crackdown across the country, but it took the individual killing of Renee Nicole Good on video to kind of really break through and change the dimensions and the character of the way that the country is relating to ICE. And so it's that that combination of a specific case and then the fact that there's audio and video, and then the story kind of fills in behind it.
Yeah, I agree. Very much so that sort of individual narratives about individuals are the best way to frame broader topics. That's even more true, again, in a social media era where this isn't always the case, but often the direction of coverage is, right, something goes viral, and then that thing going viral attracts coverage from mainstream media on, it's noted in the article, right, this event, which it doesn't say in the article, which we're now covering because we saw it on Twitter so many times, but that is the reason we're covering. They'll say, was attracted scrutiny because of whatever thing about it. Well, those are individual stories, those are appealing images, those are appealing videos. So even more so now, that is the way to get attention to something rather than think about, what's a big trend we want to tackle in the most vague way possible? Because the reason it's getting to people's attention is from the individual story on social media.
Yeah. So there was another question. Yeah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
Yes.
My name is Dr. Muhammad Riaz Chaudhry.
Dr. Muhammad?
Riaz Chaudhry.
Riaz Chaudhry.
I am not a journalist. I am academics and literary person. I am running a literary society here, Almi Halka-e Fikrofan, Virginia. So, first of all, I will congratulate First Pakistan Global to conduct such an August gathering, which gives us an excellent knowledge, and especially I express gratitude to Mr. Dr. Moeed Pirzada for transnational repression. He so widely expressed its point of view. And also, I'm grateful to his panel, Mr. Rayan and
Robby Soave,
for excellent these expressions and putting Pakistan's political problems and abuses against human rights in their press and in this open platform. But I also agree with Jazeera point of view that this transnational repression is confined to Pakistan and Iran, whereas occupied Kashmir and atrocities in Kashmir as well as at the hand of Indian state government and other minorities in India, they are neglected.
Okay.
So some of our friends, Iqbal Saab, he also pointed out. But on the overall, I'm very much gratitude to all these panels.
So
they give us
thank you.
A good information.
Thank you. Well, when we mention Kashmir, of course, there are so many other issues across the world. So right now we were focusing on transnational repression that is emanating from Pakistan. Anwar Iqbal Saab is the correspondent for past several years, very diligently covered Washington for Pakistani papers. His perspective, which you just heard, Robby and Brian, is that the media has to pick and choose. He makes his choices, New York Times has to make his choices. I fully understand this, that not everything that is happening in Pakistan is of interest to New York Times. But my problem is that even when it covers, it is not giving an accurate picture of what's happening in Pakistan. That is what the problem is. Not only that the coverage is very limited, its coverage is very biased, very inaccurate. It's giving the American, for instance, the massacre took place. When you read the New York Times on 7th November 2024, a massive massacre took place in Islamabad, just literally yards away from Pakistan's Supreme Court and Pakistani Parliament. People were killed. New York Times, Washington Post did not attach any importance to that thing. If the same thing had happened in Venezuela, they would have broken the floor. This is what happened. Not that the issues are not important.
This is a phenomenon I've recently become aware of that has a name that Michael Crichton coined, and I can't think of what the name is right now, but that everyone recognizes when they read coverage of something that they know, that a subject they know very well. They identify the coverage as erroneous and flawed and horrible, but then when you read coverage of something you don't know about, you assume the coverage is perfectly fine. But if when you know about it, it's bad. It's probably bad a lot of the times. It's a very troubling phenomenon. Those of us who've had any, as media figures, if you've ever been involved in a media scandal and you've seen reporting on details of your own life and you go, they don't even know what my middle name is, how could this be?
Are you suggesting that the rest of the New York Times coverage is as flawed?
Right, that is what I'm suggesting. But the silver lining there is, again, that the power and importance, we've talked a lot about the good that could come from serious mainstream coverage. And those two organizations, to be fair, are still very big and very powerful, the New York Times and the Washington Post in particular. But overall, the mainstream media and other mainstream media institutions have declined in importance and face more robust competition than at any point in the history of American media. And so the existence of so many other, so many television networks and print, magazine, newspapers, books, and then YouTube. And YouTube has won. Like, that's where most of people are getting their news and information from. It's from YouTube, it's from TikTok, it's from X. So people are trying to advance the cause of human freedom can benefit from the fact that getting the attention specifically of the New York Times is much less important than ever before. And frankly, if you get attention through these other things, you will eventually get their attention. Now, they won't do a very good job, maybe, but that's the case.
We will keep on trying. We will keep on trying. Let's take a few questions and then we wind it up. Yes. Yeah, go, talk to Zubi.
So, I think, Dr. Moeed, one criticism on that you're a little bit more hung up on New York Times and Washington Post, while we have the whole alternate media, was the reason why they didn't cover it well. Number one. Number two, there is always this criticism of mainstream media, and I want to take both of your comment on that. That, the John correspondent also said that, it seems like it's a very methodical process of selecting news, but what I understand it's not. And especially for American mainstream media, it seems like that it is more of an extension of the State Department foreign policy, what takes attention. Let's take an example of Iran right now, right? What is happening in Iran, we see a lot of coverage, whether Democrats or Republicans, we always see a lot of coverage on China human rights abuses. So it seems like it's more of an extension rather than them making an independent decision what to cover or what not to cover. So I just want to say, what do you guys think about that observation?
What do you think about that?
I think that there's a sympathy between the State Department and the New York Times. And also, of course, there are sources that speak to reporters there. I don't think that the State Department is telling them what to do. I don't think they have to. I think it's I think they have a mind meld that is more effective than any conspiracy ever could be. And so, but yeah, your other point is that it's more chaotic than methodical is probably true, so which is an opening. But your other point that they're really waning in their influence anyway is also true.
Well, and it used to be, again, from the perspective of the American right, it used to be the case that these mainstream large media institutions like the New York Times and so on and so forth, the Atlantic, when they have they want to feature one, they're liberal generally in their outlet, but interventionist on foreign policy, we're all critical of them for a variety of reasons. When they want to feature a conservative, a right-wing perspective, that person will be every single time, always was, the in-house conservative columnist at the magazine or newspaper is a pro-State Department, pro-interventionist type of personality, was always the case. And that is, so again, it's both good that those institutions are declining in importance, and also there is more, that is no longer the case to the same extent, that the people on the right who have a different foreign policy view have come more into influence in media, if not directly in the Trump administration. So that is a phenomenon that has died off somewhat in a healthy way.
So, Dr. Soave, I, as a media person, see that in any system, certain publications and media platforms have a central value in defining the narrative. They define the narrative. And in Pakistan, for instance, for the past several decades, the English newspaper, The Dawn, has been a paper of record. So every day, whatever is being reported by social media, by television, I do counter-check how Dawn has reported it. What has Dawn, and by and large, despite all the repression and despite all the misgivings about Dawn has stood for itself. I mean, the government of Pakistan has banned their advertisements. They are even influencing the private companies not to give them advertisements. I have heard that people have not been getting their salaries in time for the past 2 or 3 months. But Dawn has stood up for itself. Similarly, New York Times and Washington Post define, it's not a conspiracy between the Department of State and the New York Times, but it's like the New York Times is a sort of a paper of record. It defines the way United States looks at the world. Now, it's a declining influence, as Robby Soave says, it's a declining influence, all because the media market is getting fragmented. But still, certain publications will be more important than the other publications, right? For me, Israeli paper Haaretz is very important. Many Jewish Israeli friends, when I come across here, they said, if you read Haaretz, you hate Israel. I mean, Haaretz is one of the major. They said you cannot be liking Jews if you read Haaretz, but Haaretz is Jewish, right? Haaretz is a paper of record from Israel, right? And just yesterday, Haaretz published an investigative story that basically says, you might have seen that how Mossad and the Israelis had a plan to bring Raza Pahlavi as the future leader. I mean, they're all set, boots and ready and suited, booted. He's waiting to become the next ruler of Iran. So certain publications are important, but I think that like these kind of seminars, of course, in a limited capacity. Today we have Suave with us. Ryan has played a huge role in introducing. Some of his stories have been read by congressmen. I came across people when you covered so they had read it. So we do not have a recognition inside this system. We have existed, say Pakistani diasporas have existed in the United States from 1960s, but it's only in the last 3 and 4 years that they have reached out to the media, the secondary media, to the Congress and Senate to talk about Pakistan. Otherwise, the Pakistani media were used by the Pakistani military to talk against India. That was what the role was. We want spare parts, we want F-16s, we want gunship helicopters. This is what the Pakistani diasporas were doing. So it's a journey that has started, and we have to take it forward. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I have one question. So I think idealistically, the way that everybody's talking to traditional media is like, they're supposed to be the media or, journalism is a public service. However, the traditional media is actually a business model where they have to look at, their leadership and how much they can sell their media. So some of those stories that may be, internationally, maybe, important, but not valuable for their readers. and you guys are sitting here because you are independent, journalists who are actually doing the public service. So we have to, distinguish ourselves a little bit from, their perspective too. When the actually, traditional media would make the see and wish story to run, they would have to see, is our readership has this appetite, to go for that story. So that's one comment that I had. The other thing that I had is I think, we cannot only, just blame the military regime, Pakistan for the entire failure. I think half of the burden goes to, political parties, which are not actually doing their part. I'm not talking about PTI only. The rest of the political, diaspora or, political, the parties are there. They actually have given up on their democracy or their values for that. And in my opinion, sometimes democracy itself is a shape of a dictatorship too, because if you see across the border in India, they are totally democratic, but they are very authoritarian regime there too, which is also causing the same sort of atrocities against a minority, which some of the people have mentioned here too. So
but there's a huge difference. I mean, the courts are there. I mean, how many Indian journalists are living in exile have been given life imprisonments?
In Indian media is also under suppressed. If you see print, they actually, print when they published the story about, their main Sikhs, their media was shut down. They were threatened. Karan Tapar, who's doing it, he was threatened. Parveen Sani, you see it, he has been threatened. He has been told as he's a traitor.
Who?
Parveen Sani.
Parveen Sani, I'll explain that. Go ahead.
Well, one thing I was going to say to your earlier point, though, about the business of journalism, I guess I would push back on that a little bit because, for instance, we could take a different subject. Israel. Trust me, I am as ruthless a businessman of journalism as you can find, and so is this man right here. There is, it's not just like a public service from the good of our own hearts. There's tremendous audience interest that we saw on YouTube for instance, coverage of what the Israeli government was doing from a negative way, coverage that is not taking place in the mainstream media because it is ideological for them. And they are it's both ideological for them and they are more, they're actually more shielded from the business of it. They have subscribers that are just generally happy with the product. Whereas we are fighting for more and more clicks every day. And I want to see that number go up and up and up and up. And what we find is that skeptical coverage of some of these dominant foreign policy narratives that are ignored for ideological reasons in the mainstream media, we are capitalizing on in the goodness of our own hearts and also ruthlessly for business-related reasons. So there's an aligning of a profit incentive and some of this kind of stuff.
So there's some sort of balance in between. So coming to this thing, India, I think in Pakistan, it's very fashionable to say that India is also like Pakistan. There's no doubt that in the last 10, 15 years, the authoritarianism, as you mentioned, has increased in India with the rise of BJP and the RSS. And the media is perhaps less free, they're more afraid. But there is a world apart. The gentleman you refer to as Praveen Sani, he's not known in India at all. The Praveen Swami is known in India. The actual journalist, which is the Indian household name, is Praveen Swami, which is an investigative journalist that was brave enough to publish the story about Kulbhashan Jadhav in the Frontline magazine, explaining this how the Indian Raw had actually sent him. Praveen Sani, on the other hand, runs a magazine, Force magazine. His viewership is all Pakistani. Very few people watch him in India. He starts speaking against the Indian military in the morning, in the afternoon. He's pro-China, pro-Pakistan, anti-Indian military. And yet he goes to his office every day. No one has abducted him. No one has abducted his family. His car has not been burned down. Not a single FIR has been registered against him. He never disappeared. His magazine runs. He pays his taxes. He's living a happy life. He sleeps in his own bedroom. Now, on the other hand, several dozen Pakistani anchor persons and journalists have lost their jobs. There are at least 3 dozen Pakistani TV anchor persons that in the last 3 years have lost their jobs. Their YouTube channels have been shut down for one or the other reasons. Their families have been picked up. People have been hung upside down. They have been tortured. And then the tyranny of the Pakistani regime is being extended to American soil and the British soil, where they're hiring thugs to beat the people and to do things. So there is no comparison. Somehow or the other, this is also part of the Pakistani propaganda that India and Pakistan can be compared with each other. There is no comparison. I mean, look at this Arundhati Roy, the Indian author. She has written extensively against Hindutva, RSS, and BJP. She lives in India. She's not living in Dubai. She's not living in England. I mean, so Indian journalists and critics are living in India. No Indian journalists are having registered cases for anti-state activity, for speaking against India, or speaking against Hinduism, for speaking against the Hindutva. This is all the Pakistani story that, you know, India is like that. India is very different from Pakistan. Yeah. So, your last question, and then we.
Yeah, sure. I have a. Thank you very much.
Just bring it close to you. Yeah.
Thank you very much for giving us time and enlighten us about your knowledge. My only question about United States State Department policy is, this is the same Pakistan Army. When the Afghan war, they used to say, do more, do more, do more. And it's the same Pakistan Army, without any protocol. One general comes and sits in the White House and have lunch with President of United States. What is this dual confusion for the rest of the people?
Thank you. Like you see, Army, they thought was working against them through do more. They said they were playing double games, and now history has been created when a serving general comes and meets and has lunch with the President of the United States. What is this?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yes, the view, like you said, in the national security state and in the State Department, is that Pakistan's generals can't be trusted, that they constantly play a double game. And yet, they were determined to be preferable to Imran Khan. That's the paradox of or maybe it tells you something about how hostile they were to the idea of a sovereign Pakistan. I think sovereignty is a threat in principle. That they'd rather deal with somebody who does not claim sovereignty and is duplicitous and double dealing, but they figure that they can outsmart and box in the Pakistani generals. Whereas with Pakistani democracy, you have to then speak to them on equal terms, and the United States is not interested in that. I guess that would be my best way of guessing.
So one last question, and then we went. Yeah.
And then I guess this question is for Ryan. For the last couple of years, I think 2-3 years ago, was the first time we actually met, when some of us were demonstrating outside the State Department, and you came in at that time. We didn't know who you were, but it's so refreshing to see how you become so prominent, and now that you're wearing, at first the city topi and now the Bakan topi, so you're our own personal Gora. So you've kind of taken upon yourself to help us through this. We're going through, you heard some of the questions which were somewhat really pessimistic as far as what the future holds. And I never disliked India as much as what they did when they imposed the war, leading to giving more power. The only person who benefited from that was Asad Munir, and which prolonged Imran Khan's stay in jail. So I guess it's a question or a comment. Do you see any, we'd like to, I just saw this cup with Imran Khan's picture, which says hope. And we'd really like to stick with that hope, but unless the military is in power and Imran Khan actually never comes out, I think we're just going to keep having these discussions where we're going to be meeting at Busboys and poets and other places. What do you see? Is there any optimism that you see?
As long as people continue to have some hope, there's hope. It's hard to see the path out at this point. But people have overcome darker times and worse odds and come out the other side. Time moves on, and you don't really have any choice but to hope. So it's really the only option, whether it's realistic or not.
Let's take the last comment from Suave, and then we wind it up.
Sure. Despair is bad for the soul, so don't do it. And again, the unique characteristic of this moment in a domestic U.S. political context and U.S. media context is that The administration's current foreign policy is very much up for discussion and debate and revision to the extent that even people in the administration don't know where it's going to end up. And that there is a tremendous power of individuals, I would say, at this moment, rather than large institutional forces. And if there are a small number of people in charge of these tech companies and who have the president's ear who could say the name Imran Khan and change what is happening. It seems not all that unlikely. It's true. Or maybe not easy, not likely to happen, but not impossible, I want to say.
So, might make quick.
Yeah, you have a question?
Just
okay, go ahead.
So I think that what will probably lead us to more clarity about what needs to be done is going back to the diagnosis. And at the risk of oversimplification, for me, and at the benefit of no one being able to give me a rebuttal, but I do think, if I had to put it to one thing, it would be the Pakistani liberals selling out and betrayal of their own principles, which is why a good chunk of the media, including alternative media, hasn't covered this. So if you begin with that, you probably see, well, this is probably not insurmountable. If that's what happened, the diagnosis, and those same liberals today are actually acknowledging what has happened. Well, you do want to say, like Jack Ryan, what do you think was going to happen? A military dictatorship happened. But the good thing is, many of them recognize that's the diagnosis. We're kind of dancing around that. That is why, because we know that how large this intellectual class is. It's not small. So not only the alternative media, the New York Times, Washington Post, that's what they're hearing. So that's what we need to take advantage of now.
Thank you, Junaid. With this, we conclude this. A big applause for both Ryan and Robby. So Ryan, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
And Robby Soave, thank you so much. It's very interesting meeting you. We'll continue our conversation. Thank you to all of you once again for joining on a Sunday. And to just adding to the last, when you said that what is the hope, things always change if it was not inherent in the nature of the process. Roman Empire, British Empire, Ottoman Empire, Soviet Union would have been still around. Things change.
I mean, and let me add one more thing. This was organized as a fundraiser, and I just want to express my gratitude for so many of you who chipped in even before this started, many thousands of dollars to go towards our coverage, which always makes it easier internally for me. Why are we covering Pakistan? It's well, from a business case, people are donating. So we got to give the people what they pay for.
Big applause.
So if you haven't given yet, please do. If you give more, give more. So thank you.
Thank you once again, and we can continue our conversation even afterwards on the topic.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
So thank you very much for doing what you guys are doing. And coming back to the cup, this is something that we do for the PRP. Moeed knows this is for the prisoners who are unjustly incarcerated in Pakistan. And there might not be a lot of us, there are some of us in this room today whose families have been impacted by the transnational repression, and Ryan, I've spoken to you about it. Our dear friend Khatija Shah, she's an American citizen, and she has been unjustly imprisoned for 9 months, and now she is again. So it's just something very personal to all of us, and we've been working towards it, and thank you so much for all of you, for raising your voice and making it like #1 thing for all of us. Thank you very much again.
Thank you. Thank you.